we were hanging out so much. She was like, Brian wants to meet you. I was like, okay.
So in this video, I want to deal with Rose's impressions of Brian. And what's amazing is that immediately she seemed to sense that there was something off with him. Now I believe her, and it's probably likely that that's the case, but it's also possible that on the other side of time, in hindsight, she, it's like obvious that something was wrong with Brian, and so that might be tailoring her story to some extent. You do wonder if she said to her mother, something's off with this guy. Didn't she say that to Gabby? And suppose the other side to that could be, if you want friends and you need friends, do you say that to your friend? Even if you're right, do you say that? Because some relationships can work out even if you don't like that person's partner. That person, it might just work out.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime.
We were all going to the beach together. And he kind of just sat back there and read his book while Gabby and I hung out. It felt like a parent was watching us on a play date. It was very weird.
So as you can see, I'm driving, and I think one's got to be practical about it. A big part of Gabby and Brian's story is that they were in a vehicle together, they were driving somewhere, not just half a day or 1 day or 2 days, but driving every single day, day after day, week after week, month after month for 2 whole months. And then you've got to think about how expensive is that? Fuel, what's fuel going to cost you? Where are you going to stay every day when you're going from point A to B? I mean, you're not staying in your own accommodation, that's expensive. And then there's also the difficulty of roughing it. That starts to build up, where you start to smell, the person next to you starts to smell, and you're uncomfortable. I don't know whether that Ford Transit van had air conditioning, but if you taking a time out, and remember, and I think this is really a big aspect that's really underestimated, all of this happened in July and August, the hottest time of year in America. And if you like taking a time out and you're hot and uncomfortable, then do you really like recover? Do you kind of get a sense of relief from everything, from the stress of traveling and so on? And Gabby talking about Brian's stinky feet, would they have stank so much if it wasn't so hot? So I think that's also a factor. And if you think about the Moab stop, and they say, where are you going and what you're doing? Gabby actually says they went to get water. And I also think that she says something about, well, he says you can go and take a shower. The officer says you can go and take a shower somewhere, and you'll just feel better. But you can see that the fact that they were getting water, part of that is just because it was so damn hot. And you may remember, while they were standing there, Gabby took 2 bottles of water. That's how present that whole aspect was. And all of that is going to aggravate the aggravating factors that are already present. Not having money. Someone who's with you is like, I don't want you recording this, let's rather do this today. Meanwhile, there's that feeling of, I need to do this, I need to do that. And then Gabby was probably humoring Brian, but meanwhile thinking, I really need to do this, and I don't like the fact that I feel like I can't. And you may remember when Gabby was at home, she said, when Roberta would get upset, that she would sort of tiptoe and need to be kind of careful around her. Well, now the same thing's happening with Brian. Before we get to the rest of this analysis, and as you can see, we are doing something different this time, let me know if you like this change of format. Also let me know if you don't. Bear in mind there are 2 additional reviews for Christmas Star. I'll be taking you through them when we do the next episode on the Ramsey case. So look out for that. If you're finding this analysis refreshing, interesting, worthwhile, please hit the thanks button and let's get started.
But he was very nice. I do remember coming home and saying to my mom, she's like, well, how was it? How was her boyfriend? And I was like, he's a really nice guy, but there is something off about him. And that just started becoming more and more clear as our friendship progressed.
So another question that arises is, if Rose did realize kind of immediately that something was off with Brian, didn't Gabby? And if so, why not? And that also kind of brings one back to, what did Gabby see in Brian? And I think the answer is in part, the boyfriend before Brian didn't want to do the van life thing, or I'm not sure. I wonder what happened there, because that was their idea, so why didn't it happen? Anyway, the point is, Brian was going to execute on this idea, and maybe that was worth a lot to Gabby. It's like someone who's going to participate in something that meant a lot to her, and maybe she needed someone like that. She needed a partner in that aspect. And so maybe that whole thing, like, I want this fairy tale, I want this adventure, that's going to cloud over every sort of transgression, every sort of red flag. Oh, but this is going to be really exciting, you know. It's like, I'll take the bad with the good, and the good is going to be really amazing.
Brian had a very dark side of him. Even in his art, you could see it.
Indeed, you could. And you could also see it in other ways as well. Just this whole idea of him hanging back, sitting in the hammock while the girls played. You know, what's going on? Like, why is he to one side? And then in this image where he's holding a book on cannabis, obviously cannabis was a very big deal to Brian. I mean, have you ever held up a book of cannabis for a selfie? So another thing that comes up in this particular segment of episode 1, you literally see a photo of Brian holding a book with the word cannabis on it. How many people do you know that photograph themselves holding a book with cannabis on it? And to me, that suggests someone who's really, really, really into cannabis. And doesn't that maybe explain a lot about Brian? It explains how he would deal with his own life, his own situation, his own anxieties, his own inadequacies, his own low self-esteem, his own feelings of jealousy in the beginning, and then also it becomes a self-repeating cycle. He takes these substances, it makes him feel good, so he withdraws even more from people, and so his go-to place to feel good is substances, not people. So he ends up not being very good with dealing with people. And Rose kind of confirms this, where she says when she meets him, he sits separately from them and he's reading. But you kind of get a sense that Brian himself knows that he's no good at social interaction. He's going to be exposed if he does. So in the next episode, we're going to deal with Rose's thoughts on why Gabby couldn't see the signs. So look out for that.